A question that's still the mystery of the case historians and researchers to this day. Why and how did the 9 hikers die at Devil's Pass? Questions that remain without a complete or final answer to this day. Yet the case was never forgotten and continued to trouble Russian public opinion and those interested in such cases. The tragedy of the White Peaks. In a harsh winter on one of the most isolated mountains in the world, a group of experienced hikers disappeared under circumstances unlike any known incident, as if nature itself had decided to swallow them and leave behind a mystery that has baffled the world for more than 60 years. A story that began as an ordinary journey and ended as one of the most mysterious and terrifying incidents in modern history. How did they disappear? Was it due to strange phenomena, as local residents spoke of before the incident? Do the Ural Mountains hide unknown beings that drove the hikers to flee in a state of incomprehensible panic? Or were the hypotheses of extraterrestrial beings merely fantasy, or a desperate attempt to explain what science has so far failed to understand? From my point of view, no theory to this day has been able to explain all the details of the scene. But let us dive together into the details of what happened. Perhaps we may reach an answer that calms our imagination or find an explanation that satisfies our curiosity and puts an end to these questions. The group that set out to the northern Ural Mountains knew exactly what they were doing. They were not amateurs or casual adventurers, but professional skiers accustomed to long journeys and harsh routes. Their goal was clear from the beginning: to reach Mount Otorten, a mountain located only 10 kilometers north of the place that would later become one of the most isolated locations. On the evening of February 2, 1959, they were only 10 kilometers away from their goal, one day separating them from success. Yet they made a strange decision. They set up their camp on an exposed slope instead of descending just 1 kilometer to a forest. Under pressure from the families, a rescue team made up of students and teachers was formed, later joined by the army and the police. Aircraft and helicopters were used to search a harsh and unforgiving region, until February 26th arrived, the day everything changed, when the rescue team found the equipment. The tent was there, but it was not as they had left it. It was badly torn and damaged. Stranger still, the shoes, clothes, and equipment were still inside, as if their owners had left in a hurry, or fled into the darkness barefoot or wearing only socks. What could make an experienced group abandon their tent in the heart of the Ural cold? Footprints led the rescue team away from the camp toward the nearby forest to the north, for a distance of about 1.5 kilometers. Beneath a large pine tree, the first terrifying answers appeared: the remains of a small fire and 2 nearly naked bodies, barefoot and wearing only underwear. On the tree were marks indicating that one of them had tried to climb it. But why? Was he fleeing, or trying to see something in the darkness? Between the tree and the camp, 2 more bodies were found, in a position suggesting that they were trying to return to the tent, as if they had realized too late that the real danger was outside, not inside. On March 5, 2 additional bodies were found in the same area, but the mystery was still not complete. The remaining victims were still missing, and the search continued for more than 2 months amid the accumulated snow, until May 4, when they were uncovered under a 4-meter-thick snow layer. They were wearing better clothing than the others, but it was not their own clothes, it was the clothing of their colleagues who had been found first. How did that happen? And when were the clothes exchanged? The most terrifying aspect was not where they were found, but their condition. The 4 had died in an extremely violent manner: broken ribs, shattered skulls, a missing tongue, missing eyes. The injuries did not resemble the effects of freezing alone, but suggested an enormous force that could not be easily explained. Who or what did this to them? And why did a journey that began with skill and confidence end as one of the most mysterious and horrifying stories to this day? One question still haunts historians and researchers: why did the 9 hikers die, and how did their journey end in such a mysterious way? Questions that have yet to receive a complete or final answer. Despite the passage of years, the case was never forgotten and has not faded from public memory. It continued to trouble Russian public opinion and arouse the curiosity of people around the world, as if it were a case's mystery that refuses to be closed. This insistence on understanding is what led the Russian Prosecutor General's office in 2019 to officially reopen the investigation at the request of the victims' families. Was there an error in the first investigation, or was the truth more complex than anyone imagined? What forced professional skiers to flee their tent barefoot in the middle of the night? Was it a rare natural disaster, or a series of small errors that turned into a death sentence? And do we really know the truth? Or do we only believe the most plausible story? Shortly after the investigation was resumed, a journalist from the New York Times asked a direct question to avalanche expert Johann Gaum from the Polytechnic University of Lausanne. What if the case were reconsidered purely from a scientific perspective? Gaum did not treat it as an old story. He decided to study the incident seriously along with his colleague Alexander Bozrin from the University of Zurich. Here, the Devil's Pass case returned to the academic spotlight. The academic site Scenics wrote that the nature of this incident continues to disturb the scientific community just as much as the case's mystery. Investigators. Every attempt at explanation gave rise to dozens of conflicting theories. After more than 6 decades of mystery, Gaum and Bozrin did not rush to offer a ready-made answer. They started from scratch, using several scientific models, as if they were reconstructing that night step by step, hoping to get closer to the truth of what happened on Devil's Pass. Could science finally lift the veil on a case's mystery that had puzzled the world for all these years? The researchers initially assumed that the skiing team had not pitched their tent arbitrarily at that location, but had dug a pit in the snow on the mountain slope to protect the tent from strong winds. A decision that seemed logical, yet it may have been the first spark of everything that followed. Alexander Bozrin was clear when he said, if they hadn't dug into the slope, nothing would have happened. Could a simple precautionary step turn into the cause of a catastrophe? But this factor alone was not enough to explain the full scene, and here appears the second, more hidden and more dangerous factor: strong winds of a special type known as katabatic winds. These winds descend from the top of the slopes to the bottom under the force of gravity as cold air formed over the snow and ice surfaces moves with a silent speed and power that the sleeping cannot feel. Bozrin says, perhaps these winds carried the snow that had been slowly accumulating, as if nature was quietly setting its trap. Over time, a dense mass of snow began to pile up over the tent without any of the hikers noticing what was happening above their heads. At some moment, the weight became unbearable, and the tent collapsed on those inside under the pressure of this sudden mass. Was that the sound that woke them in the middle of the night and forced them to flee? The researchers assumed that the tent's collapse was not the end but only the beginning, because this sudden pressure may have caused a crack in the snow layer on the slope, a small crack that did not stop, but slowly spread over the mountain surface, as if the mountain itself were preparing for a moment of silent explosion. And here arises the most terrifying question: was what happened a traditional snow avalanche, or a series of precise natural events that coincided at a deadly timing? Could anyone have predicted what would happen? Or were the hikers victims of a rare scenario that left no chance of survival? Despite everything that has been written and said, the truth remains elusive. All the competing hypotheses, including Gaum and Bozrin's recent study, fail to explain every detail of the Devil's Pass incident, as if this place refuses to be fully understood. But is that enough to dismiss the scenarios closest to logic? The German scientific site Trend der Zukunft commented on February 2, 2021, saying that the two experts did not provide a definitive solution, but only developed the most likely scenario, adding that some discoveries at the crime scene remain difficult to explain even using this new theory. Nevertheless, the avalanche hypothesis remains the closest to reality, as no better explanation has appeared so far. Are we facing the best possible answer, and nothing more? On the other hand, human imagination has never stopped going further. In previous years, shocking hypotheses emerged, reaching the point of claiming that extraterrestrial beings were behind the tragedy, while another, more widespread theory suggested secret Soviet military experiments conducted in the area that claimed the hikers' lives. Yet, with the opening of the Soviet archives after the end of the Cold War, no evidence supported these claims. Were those theories merely attempts to fill the void of truth with any story, no matter how strange it seemed? In January 2019, the case officially returned to the forefront when the Russian Prosecutor General's office announced the reopening of the investigation, this time using a different approach. The examination was limited to only 3 hypotheses, all related to climatic phenomena, out of more than 70 hypotheses proposed over the decades. Investigators considered the deliberate crime hypothesis extremely weak due to the complete absence of any evidence of human involvement, while the hurricane or avalanche hypothesis seemed more probable. Was the solution hidden from the beginning in the harshness of nature rather than in human intent? Yet no theory has been able to fully explain the details of the scene to this day. In March of the same year, The incident site was examined again, alongside a reanalysis of the nature of the victims' injuries. After months of review, the investigation results were published on July 11, 2020, concluding officially that the cause of death of the 9 hikers was an avalanche accompanied by severely reduced visibility. But does this mean the mystery has truly been solved? Or have we only arrived at the most plausible explanation? No theory to this day has been able to explain every detail of the scene, while some questions remain unanswered, waiting for someone brave enough to ask them again. Follow us and subscribe to receive all the latest updates.